Welcome to the AFGHANEYE YouTube channel. If this is your first visit, make sure to subscribe and press the notification bell so that you won't miss any of our new videos.
I'm Ahmad Walid Kakar.
Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to another AFGHANEYE Live. I am Sangar Paikar.
And I'm Ahmad Walid Kakar.
Okay, guys.
My camera.
First of all, I would like to say thank you all for joining us again for another live stream. I have to apologize that we are very late. I promised to do the live stream earlier, but unfortunately it was a very hectic day. Walid was working all day. I was on the phone with Kabul all day. I was talking to friends, relatives. I received so much information, and I also received visitors. It's a day, an eventful day, and we will try to make sense of everything that we've heard, and we will share some details about certain very shocking events. You have already probably saw how people in Kabul airport were killed. So we will talk about that as well. But I want to also request all of you who are joining us now, please make sure that you like the video, the live stream.
Make sure you share the link on your social media.
Yeah, definitely. So guys, first of all, today was sort of the first day in Afghanistan's capital, Kabul, that the entire city was under Taliban control. So after 20 years, this is the first day that the capital of Afghanistan is no longer under control of the previous regime. Except the airport. Kabul airport was under American control all day. There were many terrible incidents there, but there were also many events in the city which we will talk about. And what's so important is that the chaos, the anarchy of yesterday, the crime, the robberies, everything that happened last night and yesterday, all of that sort of more or less stopped today. So three of my friends with whom I'm in contact on a daily basis, they took it upon themselves to go and verify what is true and what is not true. So they, as soon as they woke up this morning after Fajr prayer, they got into their cars and they kept driving around the city, looking at different parts of the city, talking to people, residents, and throughout the day they kept sharing details of what's going on, what's happening. So it was very useful because this provides us with reliable information from people who are actually in Kabul. And they describe the situation, what is going on in the city. So we'll talk about that elaborately. But first of all, I would like to ask Ahmad Walid Kakar, so how was your day so far?
Pretty chaotic, being at work and trying to keep up with everything that's going on in Kabul. Just like everyone else here, the 80 or so people we've so far got, I hope that number goes up to the numbers of last night and the night before. But it's still early. But in any case, just like everyone else here, I presume, I woke up to the footage that was pretty depressing. I don't even know, disturbing, depressing. Yeah, I woke up to that footage as well as a lot of, you know, for lack of a better word, a lot of propaganda on. Osama Qayyum is saying low voice. Is that for me or for Sangar, or for the two of us? a bit louder would be nice. Like a gain me by a dirham.
No,
Say
no,
that.
no. It's not your gain. It's here. I have lowered your voice a little bit, but
I see.
uh, Osama, is it better now?
Is it better now?
Okay, we have a difference of opinion in the chat about the volume. Okay.
Sound is fine. All right. Yeah. I'll continue. But yeah, so I, just like everyone else here, I presume, or most of the people here, woke up to that footage of Kabul airport. Um, Pretty depressing, disturbing. I woke up to messages from my relatives in Kabul, of course, and also throughout the rest of the day, exposed just to the propaganda of what's going on in Kabul at the moment. That's not just on mainstream media, but of course on Twitter as well. But with regard to what happens in Kabul airport, and I'm going to ask you, Sangar, because I also saw your tweet about you losing one of your relatives, uh, Khtaidi Wabakhshi, in today in Kabul. But I think there's also been an overemphasis almost on the events at Kabul airport for the sole reason that, just to paint as much of a picture of chaos as possible. Because whilst last night we spoke about sort of the crime and the looting that precipitated and compelled the Taliban to enter the city, that has largely subsided. There's not really being a comprehensive picture painted of what's going on in Kabul and in Afghanistan as a whole, but instead we were just sort of we were plastered with that video of the people at Kabul airport station, the aircraft taking off, and a guy actually falling off an aircraft. But I obviously, in saying that, I don't want to downplay what's happened at Kabul airport, and I obviously don't want to be inconsiderate, especially knowing that my friend here, Sangar Pekar, actually lost a relative in those tragic events. But more so, I've just got an issue with how the footage seems to be focusing on one specific shuttle or a port or an airport in Kabul, as opposed to sort of what's going on around the country. But before everything else, save us, as every night I'm online with you guys. Great job you're doing. Thank you. But I want to ask Sangar, can you walk us through what exactly happened with your relative? Who was it? How old was he or she? How did they, how did this terrible thing happen?
Okay, so yeah, thank you. What happened is that last night, actually yesterday, late in the afternoon in Kabul, people were panicking. There were reports of armed gangs trying to use the vacuum because all security services in Kabul sort of just decided to abandon their duties and they just ran away. The Minister of Defense of Afghanistan, Bismillah Mohammadi, got in an airplane with a few other friends of his, and they took off with that military airplane to United Arab Emirates, I believe. Now, that created a vacuum because everyone assumed that, okay, there is no security, Taliban haven't entered the city yet, so we can just do whatever we want. And my relative was a young man, a doctor. He is someone who is I'm related to him through like my uncle is married to his niece, so it's not someone who is really close relative, but in Afghanistan, it's all family. So he recently, a few years ago, he graduated as a doctor. He was working as a doctor in Kabul, and he was recently married. He had a child. And when the situation deteriorated in Kabul, so when the reports came of armed gangs robbing people, etc., so he decided maybe he should move from one part of the city that is less secure to another part of the city where we have more relatives, so near the airport. Most of my relatives, they live there. So he was going through a road that is just near the airport. You know, the area is called Bimaru. And he was going through that road, and he was trying to cross over towards the eastern side of the city. And at that moment, there was a huge rush. Hundreds of people were trying to enter enter the airport, and the American soldiers who are inside the airport, they were busy with evacuating their own staff, their diplomats from American embassy in Kabul, and there was a lot of traffic, a lot of rush. Helicopters were going up and down, so it was a really crazy situation. So these Americans, they were worried that if they allow these people to enter the airport, something might happen. So they started firing warning shots. But the thing is with warning shots is like, for instance, when you are inside the airport and you point your gun up and you start firing, those bullets will eventually land. Okay? So what happens if you spray bullets, brr, brr, all those bullets will land eventually. But if the bullets land in the direction of residential area and places where people live, the chances are that people will get hit. And this man, this young doctor, he was so unfortunate that he was one of the people who was hit in his chest with a stray bullet. So it wasn't like somebody pointed a gun at him and tried to kill him, but those were stray bullets that were landing a couple of 100 meters away from the airport where he was crossing. And that bullet landed and he died immediately. So when he died, we didn't receive any message from that incident because most of my relatives were not available. We couldn't reach anybody via telephone lines, internet and everything. Nobody was picking up. So it could have been that they have no connection, but maybe because of the chaos, they just didn't bother answering phones coming from Europe. I have no idea why, but we couldn't reach anyone. But then this morning we heard that some of my relatives went to a funeral. They buried him, and they said it was a very unfortunate incident, and he became a victim of the chaos and panic there. And he has little children. He wasn't married too long ago. So his wife and his children, they are now without anyone who can take care of them, I asked my relatives, is there anything we can do? Is there any help? Is it necessary that we just send money or whatever? But my relatives said, no, right now there's nothing urgent necessary. But in case we need any help or whatever, we'll let you know. So I think, considering all the chaos and everything, my relatives, people who I've spoken to, they were pretty calm. They were very, they were coping with the situation very
as
well.
people in Afghanistan tend to be, because they're, quite frankly, they're just used to it by now.
Yeah, and so that's basically the story of what happened to my relative. And when I posted that message on Twitter, I got like hundreds of comments. People were praying, and I really appreciate the fact that there is such a large community of people on social media. They are following everything that's happening in Afghanistan. They're showing solidarity, compassion. They're praying for people in Afghanistan. And as an Afghan, I feel like really like this is exactly the kind of support from people around the world that we need right now. It shows how, despite being people from all different parts of the world, from different religions even, people have so much solidarity and compassion with people of Afghanistan. And I really appreciate that. I'm very, very thankful for that. And let's just all pray that things turn back to normal so that people in Afghanistan can finally have some sort of stability and peace and security, because people desperately need that. It's just a terrible situation. But so that's what I have to say about what happened today with my relative.
خالدي وبخشي
I mean,
إنا لله وإنا إليه راجعون.
I mean,
So So, guys, as you guys are all aware, as I mentioned at the beginning of the live stream, we all woke up today, depending on where we are, in wherever we are in the world, and the scenes that you're seeing right now from Kabul International Airport, which were from this morning over there, were what we saw in, these were the scenes that we saw first thing when we woke up, and as just mentioned, Sangar lost a relative, a young man, a doctor, in some of the chaos that ensued in this airport. And so we're gonna move on now, not from the airport or whatever, but now I'm gonna ask Sangar. You've been speaking to people all day in Kabul. I've spoken to just relatives, checked up on them to see what's going on, but you've been speaking to people across the capital city. So essentially, this is going to be an open-ended question. What precipitated and caused this utter chaos in Kabul?
Okay, so first of all, what we have to do is do a little bit of a reconstruction, okay? So in the last couple of days, there was news in the Afghan media, but also in international media, that Western countries have a responsibility to take Afghan refugees, people who are trying to escape the country, and provide them with asylum, whether they are people who have worked as translators or people who have worked for NGOs or whatever. But these people are being threatened, and they might all be targeted by the Taliban. And for that reason, this whole buzz in the media was about Western countries potentially taking a large number of Afghans with them as they are leaving. Okay. So a lot of people who are working already or they have worked for foreign troops, or they worked for embassies or whatnot, those people had already applied for visas, okay? But not all of them were eligible. We're talking about thousands of people, okay?
Of
So in
course.
20 years of occupation, thousands of people from across the country worked in some capacity with foreign troops.
Mhm.
Now, these people, they all have families, they have children, etc. So according to these promises, these false promises that are being given or sort of hinted at towards, that we will take all these people, a very large group of people assume that, well, we may be eligible, so we can go. And people in Afghanistan have a lot of uncertainties, not just because there are Taliban, but ever since 2014, hundreds of thousands of people every year escape the country. There are many refugees coming to Western countries. So that's the backdrop. Okay, that's the whole situation behind this whole story. What happened yesterday? Yesterday, when the airplanes came to take U.S. embassy staff and other foreign dignitaries, etc., away through Kabul airport, there were many helicopters landing. There were many airplanes coming, and people who work for the Afghan Air Force, for the Afghan Ministry of Defense, they during the vacuum, they called their relatives and they said, listen, come to the airport. We are escaping the country. We're taking a military airplane of the Afghan government with us. Get here quick. Get on board and we will escape to Europe or North America, whatever. So relatives of people who work for the Ministry of Defense, the Air Force, etc., they call their relatives. So their relatives were the first group of people who moved toward the airport so that they can enter. But as they were going, they obviously told other people, we're going, we're running, we're going. And other people said, what? Airplanes are just loading up people and going? So hundreds and hundreds of other people just heard those stories. Hey, there are airplanes in Kabul airport. They're taking everyone away. So suddenly, this rumor spread all across the city. While this rumor was spreading that people can just board planes and go, there were incidents, there were robbings, people were being looted. So there was total anarchy and chaos, and people were scared. They were thinking, okay, they're here at the airport, they're airplanes, they're just loading up people to go. And here in the city, there are armed gangs running around and robbing people and whatnot. So people are scared, they're terrified, and they think, I need to survive. So a lot of people, they didn't even pack up their bags. They didn't even take any personal belongings. They just stood up and run towards the airport. So these people, they started gathering around the airport late in the afternoon yesterday. There was already huge crowds, but as the sun went down and it became darker and darker, more people emerged. Just loads and loads of people emerged near the airport in that area, and they were all trying to enter the airport. And the Americans, all these American troops who were standing there to provide security, they weren't there for the crowds. They weren't there to prevent the crowds. They thought that maybe armed groups, Taliban or whatnot, they will try to attack Americans and kill them. So that's the reason why Americans sent all those troops there. But when all these civilians try to rush the airport, the first line of security around the airport are supposed to be Afghan security forces, the people from the regime, so the police, the airport security, etc. But those people were all gone. They all just left. They said, okay, regime has fallen. We don't have to work. We're going. So all of them left. So there was no security in boundaries, in outer circles around the airport. The next line of security inside the airport, that was created by the Americans. The American troops were inside the airport, and the Taliban weren't going near the airport because they agreed with the Americans that we will take the city, except the airport, because you guys are evacuating. So as long as they don't go after the airport, the Americans promised that they wouldn't bomb them, or that they wouldn't retaliate. So the Taliban tried to stay away from the airport. However, in some places, like in Katakhil, one of our viewers from the live stream, he messaged me earlier today that in a village is called Katakhil, it's in east of the city, near the airport, somebody was shooting at American helicopters that were circling around the city. And he said that when that person started firing at the helicopters, the Americans carried out an airstrike in Katakhil, and they killed a lot of people. So they retaliated against them. But in other parts of the Kabul airport, these hundreds and thousands of people were just running towards airplanes, and they just believe that, okay, these airplanes are here, there is no security outside the airport, so we can just board the planes and just go. And civilian airplanes that belong to Afghan airlines like Kam Air, Ariana, etc., they are grounded because the entire air around Kabul is currently under American control. Only American airplanes are allowed to land and take off, because they are evacuating. So no other airplanes are taking off, only military airplanes. And those few large airplanes, that transport airplanes that belong to the regime in Kabul, those airplanes were already gone. They just took off with relatives of people who work for the Ministry of Defense, etc. So people were standing there and just staring around and wondering, okay, is any of the airplane here taking off and taking us? You saw the pictures, you saw the images of people trying to board a plane while the plane was already taking off. That's a panic and chaos that was created as a result of these rumors, these stories, and the utterly irresponsible decisions taken by Minister of Defense and people like him, who basically they have contributed to a large part to this chaos. They have created the incentive for people to just rush the airport. And to be honest, like if I just try to gather all the stories that I have heard from the areas outside the airport. So airport is in the north of the city, okay? So it's in the north of the city, but just outside the airport in most other parts, there's quiet, nothing going on. People are just carrying on their regular daily life. There are no major incidents. A few here and there. There are thieves who are being caught. There are some robbing and looting going on. But
So this leads me to my next question. Thank you for the background as to how and why this all emerged. And honestly, it just shows the irresponsibility of of high-ranking officials, of people on the ground. We spoke about General Bismillah Mohammadi, who was the former defense minister, and he was wishing for curse, um, lanat on Ashraf Ghani and his gang, basically, for fleeing the country, and then he himself fled the country. It just summarizes the whole thing, because now Dr. Abdullah, Hamid Karzai, and Gulbuddin Hekmatyar, who have all, in different ways, shapes, and forms, been foes of the Taliban, are now in Kabul. And like we said, we have our reservations about all three of those personalities. But you know what? They are there at the hour of bad situation. But in any case, I want to ask you, what do you think is the reason why are Western media outlets in particular uniformly focusing, not to say that what happened in Kabul airport doesn't deserve attention, of course it does, but why is it that the entirety of Afghanistan within the span of a morning has been reduced to Kabul airport and a couple of hundred people running around the plane?
okay, so
At a time, I may add, sorry, at a time in which this is the first day in which the Taliban have been in Kabul and ruled it as a country. So it's not some sort of, there isn't some sort of irrelevant show going on in the rest of Afghanistan. Um, this is history, like I said, unfolding as we speak. This is the first time since the Americans invaded, the Taliban were toppled, that they're back in Kabul. So surely you would think that the first day of Taliban government, as ad hoc, as improvisational as it is, given the circumstances in which it came about, surely that would warrant and merit some attention. But what we've seen from Western media outlets is as if Afghanistan is restricted just to the Kabul airport. Why do you think that is? What would you say?
So, from perspective in the world, journalism, they say if it bleeds, it leads. Okay, so in journalism, sadly, that is the case. That is that in the media, they only like to talk about very disheartening, emotional stories, things that evoke very deep emotions of anger, anxiety, and frustration, because that's how newspapers sell. That's how TV shows sell. That's how they get subscribers, viewers, etc. So that's by just telling a very horrific, scary story that really shocks people and terrifies them. So that's one of the reasons why news media is primarily focusing on what is going wrong in Kabul right now. Okay? So telling them, actually, life in Kabul is very normal. People are going to amusement parks. People are having fun, etc. That's not news for them, because that is something that is not really exciting. But showing people falling off an airplane, people desperately crying and shouting, trying to go and enter an airplane, it sells. It's exciting and it's terrifying. So that's the first reason. The second reason is because, see, it's all part of information warfare. We've talked about this extensively, and it's all.
But who are they waging war against now? There's a peace deal with the Taliban. What could possibly be the motive for this?
Yeah, so what's happening is that, see, Western media, they identify with Western countries and Western military power and Western values and Western ideas. So the fact that their experiment in Afghanistan failed and it was an utter disaster, okay, they cannot say maybe we were wrong by trying to go and impose ourselves on a country and socially engineer that society and make them be like us. They cannot admit that, because that would mean that their ideological motives behind occupation of Afghanistan and justifying the occupation was wrong. So they create an image of saying, look, now that we are leaving, all these poor Afghans, they're so terrified and they're so scared. They want to leave with us. Okay? So they are trying to create that image, and this is why they are focusing on this matter entirely. And for that reason, they only tell this story. They only try to continue repeating the same story. If they could say, okay, you know what? Our experiment in Afghanistan failed. We shouldn't have gone there in the first place. And if we went there, if we did fight against the Taliban and we defeated the Taliban, then we shouldn't have tried to do nation building and social engineering and etc., because all of that was a big catastrophe. They don't want to ascribe blame to themselves. Like, even right now, if they blame anybody for anything, they blame Joe Biden for agreeing to
Withdrawing of all
withdrawing.
things.
Yes.
Withdrawing.
Yes.
But in any case, there are two questions from the live chat that I'm going to pick out. So one of them is from Hamza, who asks, I want to ask why the Taliban released so many prisoners from Pulacharkhi. A lot of the criminals in there deserve to stay there. And that was another question from Hikmat J, who asked, what was it that he asked? I'm trying to remember. Would all of this chaos have been avoided if President Ghani had publicly handed over power? What do you make of those two questions? How would you answer that?
Okay,
So first of all,
yeah.
why so many criminals released from Pulacharkhi? Surely a lot of those should have stayed there. That's a valid question, I would say.
Yes, I agree entirely. I think that releasing all prisoners, is a very bad idea. Okay, we can sort of understand to a certain extent that the Taliban say these guys are political prisoners. They're fighters. Okay, they say these guys are political prisoners, so they should be released. Like, for instance, when the Soviet Union decided to leave Afghanistan, my father was working for the communist government, and President Najibullah announced a national reconciliation policy. And part of that national reconciliation was not just to try to reconcile with the fighting parties that were actively involved in fighting against the communist government, but they imprisoned a lot of political prisoners, like other Marxist groups, other political groups. So my father was in charge of going and releasing those people. Like a lot of these political parties who were in prison back then, they were released in the first few years during the Najib era, and they were allowed to actively participate in society. But there were also jihadi group members who were also released. So that's always the case. Prisons are always full of political prisoners. So if the Taliban say, okay, well, now that we have taken over, we have to release all our political prisoners, but as corrupt and as dysfunctional as the current regime in or the previous regime in Afghanistan,
we still haven't gotten used to it, guys.
Yes,
we still haven't managed to come to terms with reality that our sitting president just ran away.
Yeah. So as much as I think that regime was very corrupt, the whole legal system was corrupt, people were imprisoned for 10, 15 years for just having a beard and being a rural Pashtun and wearing a turban, no trial, etc. All of that is true. It's true. All of that injustice happened. We know that it happened. The Western media doesn't like to tell it, but that's the truth. But then there were actual criminals in those prisons. There were actual murderers in prison. There were actual people who did terrible things. And there were Daesh members also in prisons, okay? So that's why a lot of people in Afghanistan said that just going to every prison and opening the doors and telling everyone, you can go, you're free. It's nonsense. It's nonsense. Someone rightfully commented yesterday and he said, oh, there are thieves, they're robbing people in Kabul. Guess what? Maybe you shouldn't have opened the prison. Okay? So I would say it's very likely that some of these robbing and pillaging that happened in Kabul could be due to the fact that those people left the prisons. But we also know that a lot of these criminal gangs were already in Kabul and they were freely walking around, and they were part of the security forces in some cases. And in many cases, a lot of criminals, if they would get caught in the past during the previous regime, they would just get caught, and then their gang members, they would just pay the judge or the prosecutor, and they would just go off free. So that's how the situation was previously. But again, I think it was a very irresponsible decision to just open the prison and let everybody leave. However, I'm not 100% certain, I'm not 100% sure if all of those people who left Policharki prison were actually released by the Taliban. Why? Why am I saying that? Because some of the people who live in Arzan Qimat and other parts of East Kabul, they said that actually the prison wasn't broken open by the Taliban. The security services, the prison guards, they just left. So when they left, then people started leaving the prison. So now I would say that yes, it is absolutely wrong to just go and open all prisons. But yeah, so the Taliban are definitely responsible for that, because in other cities they have certainly done that. They've announced it. They even said, yes, we're breaking this prison, we're breaking that prison. However, in Kabul, about Policharki, I'm not 100% certain what exactly transpired there. But anyway, it was a very terrible thing to do, because obviously some of the crimes that happened yesterday and last night could have been carried out by those people. And okay, so what was your?
There's another thing I just want to say to the people in the live chat. If you think that by spamming the live chat with the same question we're going to answer you, I'm just starting to. I'll just, we don't have a moderator as of yet. Perhaps we should get one, but I'm just going to block you from commenting. Sounds harsh, but it is what it is. The other question was from Hikmat J, who was asking that would this chaos have been prevented if President Ghani had handed over power sort of peacefully in a transition and publicly?
Why won't you try to answer that?
Sure. I believe it would have, yes, Hikmat. And the reason for that is pretty simple. I think the Taliban themselves were not and are not ready to actually govern Kabul. I don't think they expected to have to sort of walk into the city and have to prevent the looting and the burglaries that were happening. And I think that Sabir Ahmad is saying, put comment in slow mode, guys. Yeah, we'll do that. Give me a second. I'll get back to Hikmat's question in a bit. The slow mode soktanga kavi. Sangar, slow mode shishida.
Okay, so you try to answer that question, and I will figure that out. I'm going to
say that. Okay. But yeah, to answer Hikmat J, I think that essentially President Ghani wait, just give me a second, Hikmat. Yeah, so we're back. So I think President Ghani, by just fleeing alongside his closest aides, he pulled the rug from under the Taliban's feet, precipitated and provoked them into having to act to ensure the security of the capital. And a lot of the people here obviously here because they think it's the end of the world and that there's going to be sort of chaos in the capital. These are people that are scared. These are also people that, you know, they're not just scared of the looters, but they're scared of the general uncertainty in which we still are as Afghans or as spectators watching what's going on in the country. So yeah, I do think this would have been preventable rather, if President Ghani had publicly and peacefully handed over power. All right, there's another. I don't know why we've got a couple of trolls here. One of them is an Indian guy who's just basically telling us how great life is for Muslims in India. That's your opinion, but I'm gonna have to block you, man. I'm sorry.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Just we.
And by the way, but for everyone that's responding to him, causing a mess, saying that life is hell for Muslims in India, I'm going to block you as well because we've got the most people that we've ever had before. You know, this is the most we've ever had. We had 150 more even about 10 minutes ago. So yeah, you know, I can't be asked to deal with all of this. Sorry,
All right.
I know I sound impatient, but you know, I'm not here for that. You know,
All right. Okay. So please answer the question.
I did answer.
Okay. All right. Let's.
متوجه نوع.
Yeah. Sorry. So here's the thing. So we desperately need moderators. People who want
Yeah.
to moderate for us in the chat, please send us an email with your CV. We need 2 references, a background check, and we need a letter of assurance from security services that you're not a terrorist. And then we will.
And a cover letter explaining why this has always been your dream and your ambition since you were a child.
Yeah. Yes. And
Okay.
and yeah, and if you send us those mails, then we will make you a moderator.
Sure. Sangar, can you just tweet out the link whilst you're at it, just because we finished that topic? And guys, for everyone that is here, we've got about 500, just under 500 people here. Like the video whilst Sangar is tweeting out, you know, a reminder to tell everyone to come through. Please like the video. That way, other people can join in. Other people will see the live stream, and they can perhaps benefit from the conversation that we're all having together.
Yes, so I will tweet that. By the way,
Damn, we just got about 30 likes within just after that request.
yeah, you know, the guys in our chat are like really amazing.
Yeah, somehow we've just managed to attract. What the hell, bro? We're talking about Kabul airport over here, and this guy's telling us that life for Muslims in India is a utopia. Like,
You
what the
know,
hell?
so, I have no idea what
Cheery,
attracts these people.
cheery di waham, cheery di shakhsi. Do you know what I mean?
Okay. Walid, did you saw that video of Zarghuna Baloch, the women's
Yeah,
rights activist?
yeah.
I'm going to put that video on. Can you translate what she's saying for our
كم
viewers?
يجيبك يخبرك أبي.
Paktu. Okay.
Okay.
So just a little bit context. So what happened in the last 20 years is that people were told that the Taliban will ban women's education. They will ban women from any public life. And for that reason, we need to occupy Afghanistan and bomb the country to Stone Age so that we can save Afghan women. Now, here is an Afghan woman who is a women's rights activist. She has a long career in the last 2 decades, working in all sorts of capacities as a women's rights activist. She's been quoted in the media a lot of times. Her name is Zarghuna Baloch. And this woman, who is a known figure in Afghanistan, she put out a statement, and she said that she had that was this morning. Okay, she put out a statement, and she basically explained what it was, the situation of women's rights, and what is going to be like. So we're going to play that video, and Walid is going to translate verbatim what is she saying, so that and then after that, and then we will discuss and analyze the whole conversation. And we have some other related videos with regards to women's rights and the situation in Afghanistan right now, and we will also discuss those as well. So now we're switching over to a video of women's rights activist.
Thank God someone just your Charles messaged Rawalishal. They said you're the next Shafi Ayar.
Me?
Our channel he's talking about.
Okay, that person who said that, tell that person that meet me in a ring. All right, that's not a nice comment. Whoever said that, that's not a nice comment. I do not appreciate that.
It isn't.
Okay, so here we go. This is Zarghuna Baloch.
And by the way, guys, just as I'm speaking here, we got a notification that we've got a new patron on our Patreon page. So I'm not going to name the person, obviously, because there's a level of confidentiality. But thank you. We're very humbled and honored that you consider our content and our platform to be worthy of not just supporting us by sort of sharing our content, but also donate to the project. So thank you very much to that person who I will not name.
Okay, so here is the speech of Zarghuna Baloch. Let me know if you can hear it correctly. No.
السلام علیکم ورحمت الله وبرکاتو. د افغانستان ټول ولس ته زموږ خوندو ته ځینې خوندې په اندېښنه کې دي، ځینې خوندې وهمونه ورسره دي. نو زه درته
I can't hear that well. It's very, very echoey.
Very echoey?
Yeah. All I heard was salam alaikum to our sisters.
Okay. So, and now?
Nah, it's like it's really distant. Okay, I heard that. So she said to all of the sisters across Afghanistan, I have a message, and that is, please all continue going to your schools, and please continue. Did she say daftaruna? Please continue going to your offices and in your places of work.
مکتبونه شروع شوي دي، بعضې د خوندو وظیفې شروع شوي دي، نو ټول دې خپل وظیفو ته ولاړ شي.
I didn't hear that bit.
بعضې د خوندو وظیفې شروع شوي دي، نو ټول دې خپل وظیفو ته ولاړ شي. او هغه خوندې چې محصلین دي لایحه دي په پوهنتونو کې، هغه دې بېرته خپل پوهنتونو ته ولاړ شي. بعضې داخلي او خارجي انجوګانې دي چې هلته زموږ خویندې کار کوي، او بعضې انجوګانې بندي شوي دي.
چی بندی شوی دی؟ پیشوگانی بندی شوی؟
She means NGOs.
Okay.
So women who work for different NGOs, etc.
Okay. Yeah, sorry, I can't.
Yeah, پیشوگانی هم بندی شوی دی. پیشوگان باندې بد حال دی.
نو هیله کوو د هغه خوندو څخه چې بیرته خپل دفترونه خلاص کړي او خپل وظیفو ته ولاړ شي.
So I request sisters to open their offices and continue doing their duties and their jobs. But yeah, that's sorry guys, I couldn't actually hear much of what was being said there. My apologies.
اسلامي امارات پر ښځو باندې په زوره اجباري نکاحوې تړي، هغه ټول دروغ دي. هغه خبرې چې تاسې اورېدلې دي چې تر شپږم صنفه پورې به ښځې مکتبو ته ځي، هغه بیا وروسته د هغه څخه مکتب ته اجازه نه لري، دا ټول دروغ دي. د افغانستان ټول ولس ته، ټول خویندو او وروڼو ته اطمینان ورکوو چې نو خپل وظیفو او کارو ته دې ولاړ شي.
Okay, so she's saying that the reports that the Islamic Emirate, I'm quoting verbatim here, the reports that the Islamic Emirate of Afghanistan is forcing women into marriages with its fighters are totally false. And that the Islamic Emirate across the country has no opposition to basically their work. And that any sort of reports alleging that are completely and totally false. Sangar, we've also just got another patron on our Patreon. So we've got two within the space of 5 minutes. Once again, thank you. I'm not going to name the person once again, but thank you for doing so. I really deeply appreciate it. Sangar and I deeply appreciate and are humbled that you consider our platform to be worthy of your support. And we'll be in contact with all of our patrons soon. Sangar, apparently there's no sound.
Okay. Thank you guys for being with us. You know, we are doing this live stream. We have so much to discuss here, and the fact that you are with us and that you support us, you know, this only encourages us to do better and create better content for you guys. Anyway, so now
There's just one thing I want to add. There was someone that said, "Oh, this is just one woman's testimony." So it's that's not really it doesn't suffice. And I agree, but the point is that this woman is actually a very famous and credible women's rights activist that has a track record of credibility in her respective sphere of work. So the fact that she's saying it does give it an extra sort of level
And
of legitimacy.
there
We
is
have a question that I'm going to take
just
from.
1 second before we move on to the next question. Let's just pause here, okay? So first of all, what Zarghuna Baloch said is essentially she is someone who has advocated for women's rights for years, and she has been given assurance by representative of Taliban that women can continue doing their job. Okay, she went on social media to call people, and she refuted a rumor that is being spread all around the world. We even discussed this in a previous podcast, the Deutsche Welle report that women are allegedly being forced to marriage with the Taliban. She says that it's all false. It's not true. So now, if we see Western media reporting something, and an Afghan woman, an Afghan women's rights activist is rejecting that claim, that's very significant. People need to digest that. And we will discuss a few more matters related to women in Kabul after we answer these questions. So,
Shaira Karimi is asking, is there going to be any woman in the newly established government by any chance? As only women should represent women and stand for their fundamental human as well as Islamic rights. Sangar, what do you say?
if any woman is going to work for the
She
Islamic
is
Emirates of
going to
Afghanistan,
be in the newly established government
yes,
because only women should represent women and stand for their fundamental human as well as Islamic rights.
I think that Farida Koche, the senator from Balkh province, I think she should be Minister of Women's Affairs.
But do you think that there will be women in
I
the
have no
next?
idea. I have no idea.
Do you think it's foreseeable though?
During their first emirate in the 1990s, there were some women who had some roles in the they were public servants and they were leaders of certain councils, etc. So those things existed in the 1990s. I haven't heard anything in the last couple of years in their political statements or anything about women doing any sort of jobs in that particular field. But it's a good question if we have a spokesman of Taliban here, if we invite one and interview them. This is one of the good questions that we can ask because we need to write down. This is something for all you guys in the chat, okay? So we will have a lot of people here on our platform. We will interview people. I try to get an Afghan university professor from Kabul here in the chat, in the live stream today, so that he can answer a lot of questions because he was in Kabul all day. But unfortunately, due to weak internet connection and a lack of electricity, etc., he declined, and it is also very late in Kabul. He was up all day. But we will have guests from Kabul in the live stream. They will communicate in English, and we are hoping to have a representative of Taliban, a spokesperson, so that we can ask questions. So for that, we need your help. You guys, if you have very good questions that we can ask, send us those questions via mail, okay? So mail us info@afghaneye.org and write down questions that you think we should ask from a representative of Taliban if we have them on the show. So that's...
There's just one thing that I want to add to Shahida Karimi's question. And once again, I'm not a religious authority. So if I am wrong, and if Sangar, you're more learned than me in these things, please correct me. But what I understand is that in the formulation of law by a polity, by a government, there is sort of a taking into account of local circumstance, custom, right? You can't, there isn't a blanket sort of Islamic law that's imposed top down, but legal judgments are derived from a process in which local custom and circumstances that are prevalent on the ground are taken into account. So we would say makan or zaman, area and the age, right? So whilst I don't think personally it's feasible that they'll have a lot of women in high ranking positions in Afghanistan, I think what is more likely rather is that over a period of time, they will try to incorporate that into their government to bring more women into higher positions of power. And the reason they may be hesitant about doing it initially is in order to accommodate the prevalent custom at the time. And we also have to bear in mind that the whole notion of women's rights, unfortunately, which needs to be prioritized, is kind of tainted in Afghanistan right now because the previous regime used women's rights, quotas, just putting women in higher positions of power. Because the previous regime did that under the banner of women's rights, the whole concept of women's rights and working for it has become somewhat discredited. So I don't think you will one day have a female president. That's not what I'm saying. But I think that it is feasible or it is reasonable to expect that as time goes on, they will become more lax in their attitude towards this thing. You could also posit the opposite point and say, actually, they're just playing nice now, and then once they've got once they've solidified their power, they're going to go back to 1990s Taliban. I doubt that personally, but obviously it is a possibility. KJ Khan says it is tainted. Quotas don't work and are counterproductive. I agree, and I mentioned the same thing with the ethnic quota stuff about there needs to be XYZ percentage of XYZ ethnicities. But the thing is that in order to fulfill the representative, inclusive, diverse, in order to tick those boxes and get the aid that these people stuffed 4 trucks with and ran away from the country, that is what they did. So yeah, that's how I would see the issue. But that's just my personal deduction. I'm willing to sort of accept that may or may not be wrong. It's a prediction, and it's a prediction I'm going out on a limb with, and maybe I'm right, maybe I'm wrong. We'll see.
Okay, so now we're going to switch to another video. This is from today. So a little bit background. Today, when the Taliban basically established some sort of security in Kabul, a lot of their people entered the city, including their religious scholars, imams, etc. And one of the most prominent Taliban theologians and legal scholars in Kabul is Abdul Hamid Hamasi. This man is very famous in Afghanistan. He's very big on social media. You have all these videos where he answers people's theological and legal questions. And this man was imprisoned until a few years ago, and he was released from prison. But as Taliban took over the city, he entered the city and he traveled to different parts of the city. And we have a video of him in a meeting with healthcare workers, female healthcare workers, and he's talking to them. I'm going to play the video. Walid, let me know if you can hear it so that you can translate, okay?
Yes.
په شفاخانو کې دي پښتونان دي څومره ډاکټران یې چې د کابل په شفاخانو کې دي نو هغو ټولو نه موږ غوښتنه کوو چې خپلې وظیفو ته دې په اطمینان باندې راسي داسې اطمینان چې د دې نظام نه مخکې کېدی شي د خویندو یو څه د ترس احساس کوو د دې نه وروسته بلکل د ترس احساس ونه کوي تاسې د موږ خویندې یې تاسې د موږ مورګان یې تاسې موږ د جامعه تاسې ته ضرورت لري په تاسې د دې ملت پیسې خرڅ شوي دي نو صرف د دې اطمینان لپاره موږ راغلي یو آخر دعوانا الحمد لله رب العالمین پښتونان دي څومره ډاکټران.
So essentially, he's basically saying that we've come here today for the sole purpose of reassuring you and telling you that society needs you, that the nation's money has been spent in basically educating and training you, and that we want you to come to work, to your offices, with complete and total confidence and without any worry. Like I said, because society needs you, etc. And he ends with a prayer. There's a question I want to pick out, Sangar, and that I'm going to pose it to you. Quick, from KJ Khan. Quick question. A lot of people have made comparisons of the US withdrawal from Afghanistan to the withdrawal in Vietnam. Is it a fair comparison?
Oh, you know how.
And this is a question you can spend 5 minutes answering. I don't mind.
Walid, you know how we feel about historical determinism and stuff like that.
But I mean, is it a fair comparison? I mean, you even have the pictures of helicopters in both Saigon and in Kabul. What would you say?
I would
How
say
would you
that,
deconstruct the question?
Yeah, I would say that I can totally understand that people are seeing so many similarities, okay? I can totally understand that. Why? First of all, North Vietnam, or at least Vietnam, was a country that the Americans were trying to prevent from becoming a communist country. That's why they invaded Vietnam. That's why they fought against the Viet Cong. It was ideological. It was part of the Cold War. The Soviet Union was trying to expand its influence and spread communism in all former colonies of Western countries. And the United States was trying to prevent that. And that's basically the most important aspect of the Vietnam War. It was ideological. Okay, it wasn't just because they cared so much about the Vietnamese people, because if they really did care about Vietnamese people, they wouldn't use napalm and they wouldn't bomb them and destroy their whole country. It was ideological. And likewise, the war in Afghanistan was also to some extent ideological. However,
in which sense? What was the US trying to impose on Afghanistan?
I will come to that. But first of all, we have to understand that the United States didn't just invade Afghanistan out of fear that it will become under the sphere of influence of some other ideology, and they wanted to prevent that. Just like, if that was the case, they would have invaded Afghanistan in 1996 when the Taliban took over, but they didn't. They invaded Afghanistan in 2001 after 9/11 because they were attacked. So their justification for invasion, the justification for invasion that George Bush gave shortly after 9/11, and he asked the entire world to rally behind him, whether you're with us or against us, the famous statement, it was because he said, we are attacked, okay? It was an attack against the Americans, so that's how they justified invading Afghanistan. But once they were in Afghanistan, then their involvement in Afghanistan became very ideological, okay? Because preserving foreign troops in Afghanistan depended on support from the Americans, the Europeans, the Dutch, the Germans, etc. And in order to get that support, they basically said that we are here for women's rights, we are here for democracy, we are here for elections, we are here for Western liberal values, etc., etc. And that's when it became very ideological. But what many commentators say, and we had Bill Ruger here, the scholar on international relations, a former US soldier who served in Afghanistan, and someone who was selected and nominated to become the next ambassador of Afghanistan, and the next ambassador of United States in Afghanistan by Donald Trump. He was on our podcast and he explained that it was a big mistake to go and occupy a country for ideological reasons because it's never going to work. So for the same reasons as the North Vietnamese, but the other Vietnamese as well, resistant against the Americans, the same reasons could be also seen as to why a lot of people in rural Afghanistan joined the Taliban, why a lot of people in Kabul, the religious conservatives, never supported the occupation. They never supported the foreign troops in Afghanistan. They never supported the government. So people who even actually worked for the government, their religious, ideological, their values were not in line with the status quo. So the failure in Vietnam and the failure in Afghanistan are, for those reasons, very similar to one another. We can therefore say, yes, in both cases, when Western countries try to occupy a country and wage an ideological war, they are bound to fail because people don't like to be forced into believing something and living in a certain way. It creates resentment, it creates backlash, and that was exactly what happened in Afghanistan. Just like a lot of Vietnamese who never read Karl Marx, they never read anything by Lenin, but they joined Viet Cong, not because they were communists, not because they actually believed in those things, but they said, you guys have invaded our country. You guys are occupying our country. And this is also why you see that Vietnam is now not like North Korea, a isolated communist country. Vietnam is an open society. They have a very decent life there compared to North Vietnam. The Vietnamese live a very good life, much better than us in Afghanistan. But yeah, so you see that the occupation never works. It's always a disaster. And I would say to a certain extent, I agree that the comparison is justified. But I would also caution people to just saying that everything is the same, because you have to bear in mind there are always a lot of nuances. There is always some factors that you have to take into consideration, just like 9/11.
Sure. Guys, we've got. I just gonna call everyone who's joined us since the last call. Can we please get a mass liking of the video? I'm watching the thumbs up button. But yeah, there was something else that I was going to ask you about as well, Sangar. I forgot. Hear me, Swada. But yeah, anyways, when I remember, we'll go back to it.
Okay, so guys, what we are going to do now, I'm going to share another video with you guys of today's events. Not today. This is actually from last night. Okay, so this is what happened last night, and it's important because it sort of shows what the circumstances were like last night when people were basically in total panic and shock because they saw all these thieves and criminals, the robbing and pillaging was going on. So before I show you the video, let me tell you of what some of my relatives did in Kabul. So today when I called my relatives, I said, last night, nobody could reach you. You were not available on phone, on internet or anything. And we heard the news of all these armed gangs robbing people. Did anything happen to you guys? Were you harassed or anything? And my relative said, in our street, we heard that these armed gangs are coming here to rob people. So the entire community in the street, all the men, they came out and they said, okay, let's create a guard around our street. And the ones who had guns, they stood out in front of their street with their guns, and they prevented anyone from going near their street. So they provided security for themselves. And then they say, once we stood guard for our street, nobody came towards us. But then this morning, everything was safe and secure, and we saw Taliban driving around and everything, and nothing happened. But that's how they prevented being robbed yesterday. And now I'm going to show you how one looter, a criminal, was apprehended yesterday. This happened in a hospital by hospital staff. Okay, so in Afghanistan, the hospital staff doesn't just cure people. Okay, Walid, I will ask you again to try to translate. All right? Okay. So this is from 1 a.m. last night.
So this person had come and there were two people with him. Okay. So someone shot at me and they took my car.
Yeah, that's the excuse. The guy, he said,
yeah,
I have two wounded people with me.
Yeah.
Somebody shot at me and they took my car.
But it's just that I can't hear that well tonight. Sorry, guys, but
the guy who came with wounded people, he came with a PKM light machine gun.
Nice.
So so he came with that and say, yeah, I was robbed. Like, you have a PKM, a light machine gun. Yeah. I was robbed.
Yeah. Sorry, man. I'm tonight is not.
Yeah. All right. Man. Okay. So he said, once he came, he told that I have two wounded people. Somebody robbed my car. When we started treating his friends who were injured, he took the money from the hospital and the car and tried to run away. So he said we took one of their men. We apprehended one of their men, but he got away.
I see. Wow.
And he said, and once we apprehended that guy, I turned around and I tried to go after him and catch him. So the guy who's standing next to him, he says, "But who are you? What are you doing?" And he says, "I work at the hospital."
دینو گیر کړئ مجاهدینو گیر کوو کا څه شی پټ کړو چې په خانه نه پیسې دوی راغله.
And in the last part, he asks, okay, so what did he steal from the hospital? He says money. But you see, look at this guy, the criminal that they have apprehended. So he's a big, bulky guy, and he was caught by Taliban because he ran away. But this is basically the kind of chaos and panic people experienced last night. There were many such incidents, and people had to basically act as vigilantes and start to stop these lootings. And I saw this video, somebody shared it because I think that this one is recorded by Taliban themselves. But yeah, so the situation for people who were in Kabul last night was terrifying. There is a friend of mine, his relatives live somewhere more to the southeast of the city. No, southwest. No, southwest. There's a friend of mine. His family live more to the southwest of the city, and he was receiving audio messages via WhatsApp of his relatives. They were just holding their phone near their window so that you can hear what's going on in the street. And you hear people, children, women shouting, screaming, and gunshots. Okay? So this lasted for a couple of minutes, and that person was sending those audio messages, and my friend sent me those audio messages, and he said this is the kind of terror and panic that is going on in certain parts of the city. And people were honestly, I can sort of understand why some people, they just left their homes and they run towards the airport because they thought we are all going to die, we are all going to get killed.
So there's a question. There are two things that I want to address here. First of all, there's a question by Shaida Karimi who says, and it's a good question, why do you think it's so hard for the majority of Afghanistan to accept the Taliban ideologically, although Afghanistan is already a patriarchal and undemocratic country? Is the resistance against the Taliban, or is it resistance against the religion? Sangar.
I would say that there are several reasons why people are against the Taliban, okay?
I would agree.
Yeah. So I'm going to just do this out from top of my head. First of all, Afghanistan is a very diverse society, okay? People are conservative and liberal. They're religious and secular. And then the people who are religious, they are all very different. Some people have certain religious beliefs and practices that are more in line to the Taliban way of life and thinking. They're very conservative and very orthodox Muslims. And then you have people who are Shiites, okay? So they are from a different sect. And that's on the religious side. Then there is the liberal versus conservative. So there are people who want to live like people live here in Europe, in a secular liberal society. There's no religion involved in their day-to-day life. And that's how some people in Afghanistan would like to live. There are also people who are not necessarily in favor of a Western lifestyle. They are traditional Afghans, but they are not so conservative
and they're not in favor of the state being too intrusive with regard to religion.
Exactly. So we have those differences, and then we have like rabid fanatic secularists who were either communists or they are atheists. We have those as well. And there is another major factor. In Afghanistan, the conflict has become very ethnicized. It means that every political matter has been painted into differences between people from different ethnic groups.
With the aid of politicians and Western experts.
Exactly. So first, the first group of people who really try to make everything into an ethnicity, they were the Marxists actually in Afghanistan. The Marxists,
Yes.
they were the first group of people who, when they saw that Marxism as a philosophy and political thought is basically a failure, a disaster, they didn't entirely abandon Marxism. They just removed.
I would disagree.
Yeah?
I would disagree. I would say the first people that tried to ethnicize things in Afghanistan. So we go back to the origins of the Afghan state. And people say Abdurrahman Khan, okay? But here's the thing with Abdurrahman Khan, he didn't do it. I hope Shaira Karimi is still watching here, who asked the question. Now we're discussing it because we're dissecting it because it's a really good question. That's why I picked it out. With Abdurrahman Khan, it's very true that he saw the security of his kingdom being based on Pashtun tribes. And I recall there's something that I saw of, it was a quote of his saying, the king is an Afghan, so the people guarding the borders of the king need to be Afghans. And when he meant Afghan, he meant Pashtun. But see, the thing is that that's distinctly not ideological. It was more of a practical thing. And that was why he waged war with Pashtun tribes and essentially strategically defeated them and then forcefully deported them, displaced them to various areas so that they wouldn't pose a threat to him in their traditional heartlands, as well as they'd be sort of reliant on him in the faraway remote border areas in which he dispatched them. But see, that wasn't really ideological. And if we sort of look at the paradigm in which Afghanistan existed up until, let's say, the mid 20th century, it was pre-modern in its political orientation. Kings sending their ethnic kindred as subjects, because we're not talking about citizenship here, we're talking about subjects. Kings sending subjects of theirs to rule over other subjects, with the basically kings strategically encouraging their subjects of the same ethnicity to migrate elsewhere is a pattern that's been repeated across history. So it's not that there isn't the ideological nation state kind of facet to it. After the deposition of Habibullah Kalakani, it's true that the newer elite of Afghanistan started to see that their rule was best sort of reinforced by ethnicizing things. And why was that? So I spoke about subjects versus citizenship. The first person who tried to introduce modern concepts such as citizenship into Afghanistan was Amanullah Khan, and he got overthrown. So essentially, the new Mohammedzai regime of Nadir Khan basically saw what Amanullah Khan did as something that was very dangerous, as introducing foreign ideas into Afghanistan, that ended with the end result of Amanullah Khan being deposed by Habibullah Kalakani and the chaos that entailed. So what they did was, at the same time, while saying that the state religion was Islam and that all Muslims were to essentially be equal, he also realized that strategically he needed to placate one specific demographic in Afghanistan in order to secure his throne. And now it's interesting which demographic that was. That wasn't just Pashtuns, but it was Pashtuns specifically from Paktia. If you read General Nabi Azimi's memoirs, who was a Parchami general, he said that the son-in-law of Zahir Shah actually positively discriminated in terms of recruiting for the Afghan army. He positively discriminated, recruiting disproportionately soldiers from and officers from Loya Paktia. Now that had two reasons. Perhaps you could say Paktia is a mountainous region and there's a bit of a sort of Orientalism of their sort of mountain men being good soldiers, but it was also because since Nadir's dynasty had been instituted, there had been a realization that the tribes of Loya Paktia, because of their proximity to Kabul, were of crucial importance to have on side. Kandahar, for example, was not seen as much as a threat because it was seen as a Durrani stronghold that couldn't threaten Kabul immediately. Paktia was immediately on Kabul's doorstep, and so the rationale was that we need to keep these guys on side. Now, unfortunately, the side effect of that was that a lot of those Paktiawal officers went to the USSR to train, which is why so many Khalqis were Paktiawal, right? But the point is that Sangar said, but yeah, then the Marxists, the Sitamis came along and they sort of went equally in the problem on the other side of the extreme. So the point is that there is fortunately or unfortunately the caricature of the Taliban as a sort of a reinstitution of Pashtun rule or Pashtun dynasties of centuries before. But that obviously ignores the different demographics of Pashtun society from which Muhammadzai royals came from and that the Taliban come from. I think another thing to bear in mind here is that a lot of the opposition to the Taliban comes from Pashtuns, Pashtun nationalists specifically. So Pashtun ethno-nationalists actually despise the Taliban. If we look at the discourse that comes not just from the western side of the Durand line, but also from the eastern side in Pakistan, a lot of these Pashtun nationalists actually despise the Taliban because they see them as Punjabi ISI puppets. So the ethnicity aspect is something that's worthy of getting into. It's definitely something that needs to be mentioned. There's ethnicity, and then there's also the fact that the insurgency that the Taliban have waged, or even during the emirate, they were pretty brutal. There were some massacres. Comparatively, those massacres killed less people than, let's say, the massacres of the other jihadi warlords. But still, one person killed is one person too much, as well as the fact that the insurgency that they waged was, we could say, didn't place civilian life at the highest end of its priorities. So those are the reasons that Sangar and I would say that there's a difficulty or an opposition to the Taliban. It's not just ideological, it's not just ethnic, and even, for example, if it's ideological and ethnic, it could be personal.
I'm sorry, I just received a disturbing video of someone being apprehended who was involved in robbery, and people started beating him. So yeah, so now the people are becoming vigilantes, and they just beat up people they suspect of robbery and theft, which is very disturbing. But I'm sorry. So to answer Shaira Karimi's questions, I think the questions sort of covered, but just one more element, and that is that people in Afghanistan have also been influenced by the notion that there should be a government in Afghanistan that prevents the country from becoming a authoritarian, tyrannical regime ruled by religious scholars, etc. And that fear is justified because the experience of 5 years of Taliban in the 1990s, although many people didn't really experience it because they didn't live in Afghanistan or they were not even born yet, they've heard about it. So for that reason, people are terrified. Then there were crimes committed by the Taliban. They killed a lot of people. They destroyed the home district of Walid, the entire Shamali, the villages, the vineyards, everything was burned. They killed a lot of people in Hazarajat and in Mazar Sharif. And those things, people don't just easily forget that. Okay, so when people associate Taliban with a certain experience, then the first thing that comes to mind is those crimes. They have been hearing about it repeatedly over and over in the past 20 years. So people are genuinely scared that if Taliban take over, then they will just go around and just massacring people and everything. So this is something that I can fully understand why people are opposed to the Taliban. And for all these reasons that we have mentioned, I think we have mentioned at least a dozen reasons. For all these reasons, people are opposed to the Taliban. And one of the reasons why I said that the intra-Afghan negotiations need to be supported and promoted is because, see, when people have a conflict, okay? When you have a conflict, if you have done something that to harm someone else, okay? You have harmed a fellow Afghan. You have injured a fellow Afghan. You have denied someone his basic rights. And you both sides are in conflict with one another. So in order to resolve that, because at the end of the day, all Afghans are all citizens of the same country, they all have equal rights and equal claim to that country. In order to resolve the conflict, what you need to do is bring the opposing sides around the table and have them talk to each other. This is not rocket science. This is not a crazy idea. Trust me, this is not insane to say this, but
There's
this is what we are advocating.
There's a saying in English: "We make peace with our enemies."
Exactly.
That's as simple as it is. There's a guy asking Khan, "What happened to Aryana Saeed?" Where is Aryana Saeed?
Okay. You
I have
guys.
another Sangar. I sent you something on WhatsApp.
Yeah. We will switch over to that, but first I want to show a video. Okay. Since we're talking about people who are anti-Taliban, let's move on to the next video. Walid, please say if you can hear it. Okay.
Okay.
Okay, so a little bit context. This is Kabul airport this morning. People were running towards the airport and they were trying to enter the airport. In Kabul, in all major squares and everything, there are huge banners with heads of different people. President Ashraf Ghani, former President Hamid Karzai. The airport is even named after former President Hamid Karzai. And there are many pictures of a former warlord, the warlord Ahmad Shah Massoud. So now we have a video of one of the people who was trying to escape Kabul via Kabul airport. And he recorded the masses of people running towards the airport. And then he made a few very interesting comments about this picture of Ahmad Shah Massoud.
تأثیر قهرمان کاغذی قهرمان کش برنامه نداشت.
Paper hero, because his official title is national hero, but this guy who's recording the video is calling him a hero, a paper hero, a hero on paper.
قهرمان که هیچ دستاورد نداشت.
A hero who did not gain anything for us.
قهرمان که اهداف امریکا رو داشته تحقق بخشید. توف نمی‌کنه. توف
نمی‌کنه. Other than spit on you. Because he's crying, it's a bit difficult to tell what's being said.
درفش سیرنگ تاس.
So you see the disillusion in this man's voice. He's crying and he's cursing and he says, I spit on you. the man who was promoted in the last 20 years, they even dedicate an entire week to him in the month of September, when the whole city was being terrorized by gangs associated with
He
his
is,
party.
as I said in my article, Massoud is more venerated in Kabul than Christ is in Rome, because Christmas lasts 5 days, and in Kabul, he has an entire week almost. So yeah, I think the lionization of Massoud will find its inevitable, long overdue conclusion as people sort of, with people have known for a long time, but just were scared that they'd be called ISI agents if they disagree.
And an important before we move on to your the thing that you sent me, an important point that I wanted to make here is that we have been told in the media, especially in Western media, that Ahmad Shah Massoud is a hero and everybody loves him and he's great, etc. But that has not been generally the sentiment among people in Afghanistan, especially in Kabul. People really hated him because during the 1990s, he got hold of entire arsenal of the communist regime, and he used all those weapons to basically attack other jihadi groups that were involved in the civil war, and he would destroy entire parts of the city using very heavy weapons, and he killed a lot of people. So for that reason, people don't see him as a hero. And this is the Los Angeles Times, yes, and that's what has not been told. That the media did not reveal how people feel about him. They just showed stories that fit that narrative.
I mean, if someone speaks French, then all of their sins and their acts of destruction are forgiven.
Yes, correct. Okay, so can you give us a little bit context about what we are going to see next?
This is an article that we recently were sent of Ashraf Ghani in 1989 for the Los Angeles Times.
Okay. All right, here we go.
Cut off the arms flow and let Afghans unite. With the Soviets gone, US should demand a referendum for self-determination. By Ashraf Ghani, formerly a lecturer at Kabul University, who is an assistant professor of anthropology at Johns Hopkins University. The Soviets have left Afghanistan, making the collapse of the besieged puppet regime in Kabul just a matter of time. Now, I don't have access to the rest of the article, but Sangar, what are your thoughts of our former president Ashraf Ghani and what he was saying in 1989?
He referred to the communist regime as a puppet regime, and he said that he was happy that the regime under occupation and the foreign occupation has collapsed, and that it's a good thing, and now it's time for Afghans to move on, which is quite ironic because he was the president under another puppet regime that has collapsed, and now he has left the country with bags full of money, which, by the way, we discussed this in the live stream last night. President Ghani escaped the country yesterday in an airplane loaded with cash with his wife Rula Ghani and his minions. But from what we have heard so far, the Tajikistanis refused to allow him to land on their soil. They said his airplane crossed the Afghan-Tajik border, and as he tried to enter Tajik airspace, he was asking permission to land, and they denied him the permission to land. So his plane had to divert to Oman, or was it Jordan? Oman or Jordan? But anyways, the Tajikistanis did not allow him to land, and now we are not very certain where he is. There are some who claim that he is in Muscat, the capital of Oman, in the Arab Peninsula, or that he is now in Jordan, in Amman, the capital of Jordan. So it's not really 100% sure, but anyways, it's quite ironic that this man wrote this op-ed in Los Angeles Times in 1989, and now look where we are now.
Yeah, I mean that is that's honestly how tone deaf. Calling the regime of Dr. Najib a puppet regime, Amon La basically a coward, and yeah, it's insane. But now there's another topic, Sangat, and I want to go to the social media aspect of things, which give us headaches. And when I'm talking about social media, I'm of course referring to Instagram. So there is a campaign or a hashtag, hashtag Free Afghanistan, and a lot of the sort of the anger with regard to freeing Afghanistan is coming from a reported change in the national flag. So so what's happened is that I'm not aware that the Taliban have formally announced that they're changing the national flag, but they have lowered the tricolor black, red, green flag. Um, and people are suspecting that they're going to replace it with their white flag with the Islamic Testament of Faith inscribed on it in Arabic calligraphy in black ink. Now, this I think goes to the topic of emirate versus republic. My personal opinion is that both terms are meaningless because Iran is a republic, right? And it's not exactly the model democracy of the world. Similarly, the United Arab Emirates is literally an emirate, and the West has no problems dealing with it. So what this is going what do you make about this flag, this whole thing? Because we may think of these as insignificant things, but for a lot of people they really strongly resonate with the flag or with the idea of a republic. Now my personal opinion is that since the day that this republic has been announced, we haven't seen any good from it. I would be, you know, and on top of that, emirate is not something that's exclusive to the Taliban. From about 1820, 1826 to
But they
1926,
seem friendly
we
at the
were an
same time.
emirate. We were an emirate. Afghanistan was an emirate. The land in Afghanistan occupied on the map was governed by a guy called an Amir, Amir al-Mu'mineen. Sorry, 1834 to 1926. Dost Muhammad Khan called himself Amir al-Mu'mineen in order to get greater religious legitimacy for himself to fight against the Sikhs led by Ranjit Singh. So we've been led by amirs before, albeit they were hereditary Muhammad Zayi amirs. But the point that I'm making is that an emirate as an institution is not an aberration or an exception in Afghan history. But I don't know why there's such a resistance to an Islamic emirate or there's the favor of an Islamic republic. I think what's more important is what is actually the nucleus of those two things. But what do you make about this whole symbolism battle that's going on?
I think for many people, symbolism is very important. Okay, the thing is that we live in a liberal world order, which means that philosophical liberalism is the dominant belief system and ideology all around the world. The United Nations, all major international institutions, they all subscribe to the core principles of that belief system philosophy. And that also means that a democratic government, a republic, is seen as the ideal, as the standard. Any nation state needs to be a republic. Although scholars of political science, they make a distinction between true democracy and a republic. We're not going to discuss that now because then we will have to spend another hour explaining that. But what's more important is that basically people say we want a government where people can vote, where the leaders are elected, and that they can be held accountable by the people. And we all have to have a nation state based on those models of successful nation states in Western countries such as United States, Britain, France, Germany, etc. So that's also tied to the fact that these countries are seen as wealthy, prosperous, developed, and people say that, okay, if we want to have a country that we can be proud of, then we have to emulate them. And a nation state, you know, the concept of a nation state is based on a lot of assumptions, and but also myths. You need to have myths. You need to have, like for instance, Pakistanis believe in this myth that their country was solely created for the sake of Islam, and that the religion of Islam is the most important reason for the existence of their state. And basically they identify being Pakistani as being Muslim. And those things are very popular. Those are very strong ideas. There is a book that I advise all of you to read. It's called The God of Modernity. It's about nationalism and nation states, etc. So those are the dominant views and those are the dominant beliefs. And most people who have some sort of basic education, they are always influenced by those ideas. And now you could say, well, it is true, it's a fact that Western nation states are very successful, that they are very well functioning. I live in a secular, liberal Western nation state. It's great to live here. This country is probably one of the greatest countries around the world. Although many people would not really appreciate that. I, as an Afghan, do, because I've seen what other models of government are like. I've seen communist Afghanistan, I've seen Soviet Union, I've traveled around the world, and I can say that with certainty that this country, the Netherlands, but also UK, they're one of the greatest countries in the world. So if somebody says we as Afghans need to have a democracy, a republic, and we have to have the symbolism, the flag, the national anthem, etc., it's all tied to that belief system. Okay, so when somebody tries to take that away, they say they are taking part of our identity, of who we are, of who we aspire to be, things that give us the sense of identity and comfort, something that we can be proud of, something that we can really feel positive and great about. And you see the Taliban lowering that flag, and then they're raising their flag. And while this is happening, bear in mind, in the last 20 years, there was a huge effort in Afghanistan to basically shove this idea down to people's throat. Even the last few days before the fall of the regime, you had like a dozen nationalistic songs with flags waving and people dancing, and you see everything painted in the colors of the three colors, you know, black, green, and red, the Afghan flag. And all of that was created to rally support behind the regime, because those symbols are very powerful. People identify with them. And now that those symbols are gone, they basically reveal how emotionally they were attached to symbols, how they were emotionally attached to myths. And
but wouldn't you say that those emotions, that craving of some sort of identity, with an identification with those symbols, don't you think that should be respected by the Taliban?
I think this was something that was even debated on one of Afghanistan's prominent TV shows. The spokesman of the Taliban, he was invited, and people were grilling him They were asking him very critical questions. And at one point, the host of the show, he said, look, this flag means a lot to us. The Shahada, the La ilaha illallah, the testimony of faith for Muslims is on that flag. This flag has represented us for more than 100 years. So we don't want to replace the flag. And then he basically cornered the spokesman of the Taliban. And then the spokesman said, you know what? It's not even about flags. It's not about symbols. That's not what we are fighting for. We're fighting for the idea that we want an Islamic government, etc., blah, 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 whatever. So long story short, it's such a powerful idea that in a debate on TV, the host managed to get that out of the spokesman of Taliban, and he said, even if the flag remains, we have no problem with that. Now, looking back at that debate and what has happened in the last few days, Taliban are removing the flag and raising their own. I would say that if we have a government in the next few days, and if Taliban allow people to have a say in future government and the future of Afghanistan, I would say that many Afghans will probably say we need to have the flag back. So raise the flag again. I think a lot of people will demand that. And
you know what? I'm not actually opposed to the changing of the flag, but I'm not in favor of changing it to the. I'm not in favor of changing it to the Taliban flag, because I feel that a national flag and a party flag should have their own distinction. But I, just out of personal preference, think that the old flags, the black flags of the Emirates or the Mohammed-Zay Emirate period, they looked pretty cool. That's my personal preference.
Okay.
But I think that, so would you say, so there are two ways of discussing this. First of all, the Taliban are removing the flag, and this is 100% confirmation that they're actually just Punjabis and they're trying to destroy the Afghan national identity. Second is that maybe they're actually like trying to foster a new Afghan national identity, trying to mold a new identity in their own image. Maybe they look at the history of Afghanistan and they see a lot of things that they would perceive as having gone wrong in the formulation of this national identity, and they want to sort of foster a renaissance of a new Afghan identity, one that is very much centered around their ethos. So are they Punjabis, or is it the second?
I would say it's the second.
Okay.
With regards to Punjabis, it reminds me of another very interesting event today. So you see all these Taliban fighters, they're entering all major government institutions, even the parliament. So a lot of these Taliban fighters from Nuristan, they entered the parliament building in Kabul. But what this is also very pathetic. It's ridiculous, okay? And this reveals also how ignorant some Afghans are about their own country. So you see, in Nuristan, they don't just speak Nuristani, okay? Just like in Badakhshan, they don't just speak Farsi. There are communities of Afghans, of very small communities of couple of thousand people, sometimes just a few hundred people, and they speak a different language. And if they speak a local language, they speak in a sub-dialect of that language. So what you have is these typical Nuristani Taliban with really extremely long hair and long beards, which is characteristic for people in some parts of Kunar and Nuristan. You can recognize them from that, from those red, red or blonde type of long hair and long beards. And those guys were in the parliament building, which is a very bad image. You see a couple of guys with guns walking around the parliament building. But that was not the essence of criticism on social media. The essence was, why are these guys speaking in Punjabi? But they weren't. They were speaking in a dialect that is spoken in Nuristan, but because people don't know, they don't even know what people speak in their own country. They're just mad at everything on social media. Okay, if you have a legitimate, justified criticism, Bismillah, okay? But you cannot go and label your own countrymen, even if you disagree with them, even whatever. You cannot label them as Punjabi because they speak in a dialect that you're so ignorant that you happen not to know. It's embarrassing. It's pathetic. But that if you read the comments, people are like, look, confirmation, Punjabis in our parliament. This is a humiliation. Indians build the parliament building. They donated money for Afghanistan so that we can have a fancy parliament building. And now you see these evil Punjabi terrorists in our parliament. And I was like, oh my God, I was about to slam my head against the table. This is not Punjabi. This is a local dialect, you know. But let's just move on to something more lighthearted.
I think we should begin to wrap it up because both of us have work tomorrow. We'll take one or two questions.
Just short clip, okay? I'm going to show you a short clip. That's just something happened today. So this is a reporter of CNN who dressed up like this because obviously Taliban are in there. But now listen to what she says.
They're just chanting death to America, but they seem friendly at the same time. It's utterly bizarre.
That is a very good observation. Sangar, you muted yourself. So these guys, the people that watch our live streams are amazing. Like the moment you talk and they can't hear you, they're just like, we can't hear you, no sound. Thank you, guys.
I'm surprised they didn't tweet. They didn't write in the chat. Where is Sangar? Okay, guys. So
guys, can you hear him now?
I think you can hear me now.
Guys, can you hear Sangar? Just give us a quick answer. Apparently you're mute. Oh, no, someone is hashtagging where is Sangar. But yeah. Anyways, you were saying.
Yeah, okay. So what I was saying is that I totally forgot. I think I'm very tired, guys.
Death to America and Iran.
Ah, yes. So you see in Iran, they say a lot of death to America, and in Pakistan, they say death to India, or in Afghanistan,
death to Punjab.
Death to Pakistan. You know, we showed that video in the last live stream. People were saying death to Pakistan. You see, when you say death to them or death to that, you know, Murdabat, it doesn't really mean that you want those people dead, okay? It's a slogan that is basically symbolizes your contempt and disgust, whatever. But it doesn't really actually mean that you want all those people dead. But regardless, I still think that people shouldn't say that, okay?
I agree.
I think it's totally inappropriate to say that. So yeah, with that, guys, it's now exactly 2 hours. We are doing a live stream of around 2 hours every day. We will try to continue this. I would like to thank you all for being with us today.
We've got a question. First of all, I know there's a bit of a insult towards, I don't know, but I don't, just whoever's being racist on the chat, can we stop, please? There's one question I want to answer. Why is Punjab and why are Punjabis so hated in Afghanistan? Well, you see, the thing is that I mentioned earlier in 1834, no, it was 1836 that Dost Muhammad Khan was announced Amir al-Mu'mineen, the commander of the faithful. And he was announced as that in order to fight against the Sikhs who are in Punjab. Now, prior to the Sikhs taking over Punjab, it was ruled by the Afghan Durrani Empire, which collapsed because of sort of internal wars of succession. And then the Sadozay tribe, which was Ahmad Shah, Durrani tribe, was replaced by Muhammad Zayi. And there was a lot of backbiting and treachery, not just between the Muhammad Zayi Sardars, but between local Afghan tribes in what is now KPK, as well as close to Punjab. So Punjab and Punjabi became synonymous with Sikh. And that, unfortunately, has carried on into the present day, where Pakistan, being Punjab, is equivocated with Punjab, which is equivocated with Sikhs, with whom Afghans fought a lot of battles and lost most of them. So Punjabis are Sikhs. Not all Punjabis are Sikhs. There are Punjabi Muslims, but it was just an easy way to sort of other the Sikh by also ethnicizing him. And that, unfortunately, that historical hangover of what happened in the 1820s and 30s, that basically never really subsided, sadly. Why don't Afghans claim all of Pakistan? Durrani ruled Punjab, Sindh, Balochistan, and Khan. Okay, I claim all of Pakistan. But because KPK, areas of KPK, areas of Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, the tribal areas in Balochistan that are or were predominantly Pashtun, remained as part of Afghanistan far later. So Punjab and Sindh, let's say, were lost in the 1810s and the 1820s. Khyber Pakhtunkhwa was lost sort of in the 1870s, 80s, and 90s. And those areas formed what was initially the core of Afghanistan. And they had very close relations, or tribes in those areas had close relations with Afghan kings. No, you guys are not understanding. Punjabis are not uniformly non-Muslim, but in the Afghan wars with Sikhs and Punjabi became a very inaccurate synonym. It's not an entirely, it's not a thing in Afghanistan where all Punjabis are hated, but it's got a historical reason behind it in which Sikh and Punjab were synonymized with each other. And I'm just going to end it here with Mr. Morris saying there should be a boxing match for Khyber Pakhtunkhwa between Imran Khan and Abdul Ghani Brother, and the winner gets KPK. But yeah, guys, look, listen, for the 150-ish people that are watching right now, thank you so much for joining us for another live stream of ours. We've been doing these live streams every night for the last week or so because the pace of the developments coming from Afghanistan is rapid. And because mainstream media is not covering Afghanistan with the justice that we feel Afghanistan deserves, we are here doing it, and we're doing it on top of our daily jobs as well as our other responsibilities that we obviously have in our personal and professional lives. So, for example, we need to sleep now because both of us need to wake up early for work tomorrow. But that's not a problem. That's not a problem. We're here to provide a counter narrative and to enlighten and to answer questions. Now, obviously, we can't do all of those to the extent that we'd like, especially with the amount of questions that we get. But here's what I'm going to say. I spoke about experts earlier, the Western imposed experts, the Western media. These were the same people that were saying that Afghanistan is going to split up into North versus South again. There's going to be a new Northern Alliance. These were the people that were saying that, the Taliban are just a fragmented sort of number of groups that come together occasionally and fight each other. These are the people that were saying that the Afghan government enjoys legitimacy. These were the people saying that the previous Afghan government would not collapse and that its armed forces were strong. These were the people that were saying that the Taliban are uniformly hated across Afghanistan. These were the people that were saying that the Taliban are nothing but Pakistani proxies. Now, all of those claims that were made, right, just that I listed off the top of my head, there are far more, there are probably dozens more. All of those claims that I just repeated to you have been proven to be false by the events of the last few days, right? Whether we like that or we don't like that, those claims were false. So rather than listening to the same people with the same interests, with the same people funding them, with the same ideological vendettas and goals, support us. And support us by sharing our content, like our video. I'm watching the like count. Share our content, like our video, follow us on Instagram, Twitter, subscribe to our YouTube channel, and if you agree with our cause of providing a counter narrative to the absolute horse shit that we've heard for the last 20 or 40 years, please consider becoming patrons on our Patreon page, as two people did earlier, or donating to us directly on PayPal. Now, Sangar and I are probably going to go to sleep because we have work tomorrow. And wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah, guys. It was lovely to have so many of you with us today.
I just want to thank everyone on my own behalf, because I feel like you guys also given us a lot of moral support, you know. These are very difficult times. Yes, we are sitting here talking and sort of having a show, but it's also personally affecting us. But the fact that you guys are with us and we're going through these difficult times together, it makes it also easier for us. You know, we feel like, at least I speak on my own behalf, I feel a lot better because I feel like we have a community and we are going through these times together. We're providing each other support. So for that reason also, thank you very much. Thank you all.
And I experienced the same thing when my relatives in Kandahar were displaced and I didn't know. Loads of people reached out and messaged me. So thank you guys, honestly, much appreciated. And we will aim, endeavor, and strive to continue to provide content that will open your eyes to events and realities in Afghanistan, enlighten you, and widen your perspectives. And above all, to provide a critical perspective that you in turn can also critique. Dan Giuseppe is saying, can you guys go on the Sam Harris podcast?
Okay, guys, we really have to go. I really need to sleep. Look at me. I was at the gym today. I hurt myself. Can you see it? Yeah. I'm sleep deprived and I couldn't even function normally. So I need to sleep. Okay,
all I'm going to say, one last thing. If you want us to go on Sam Harris's website, maybe you should recommend us and we'll see if we can go on. But yeah, maybe, you never know, he may choose us. But yeah, so take care, guys. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah.